Hello race fans, it is Jake Sanderson aka Snowman Cycling, and I am back once again with another race recap video for you. And this week is going to be short, sharp and shockingly bad as I take you through a masterclass in how not to race on Zwift as we look back at a ZRL race from over 1 year ago, which is probably my worst ever race, my worst ever performance, my worst ever result in a Zwift race, both for your amusement and entertainment to see if we can learn anything from my mistakes to help make you a better racer. So let's jump into this one. We're going to have a quick look at the course. You can see that it's Climbers at Gambit. So they made this the first race of the season to try and get all the B sandbaggers upgraded to A. It definitely worked. And as you know by now, with all ZRL races, there are first across the line, FAL, and fastest through the segment, so FTS points available on every single segment. And in this race, we've got the Watopia Sprint Reverse, firstly, followed probably the midway point by the Titans Grove Reverse KOM, and then followed up by the Titanic Epic KOM Reverse to finish it off, if anybody's got anything left in the legs. Spoiler alert, I don't. We're not even going to get there. But let's not ruin the surprise. Let's have a look at how we start this one off. And unfortunately, it's not going to start well, which sets the theme for the rest of the race. We're less than a minute into the race, and I'm not sure if it's because I've been ill or I've done not particularly good warm-up, but I'm already less than 10 beats away from my max heart rate, which probably, considering this hasn't been a particularly brutal start, is not a good sign. Now, I knew I wasn't going to be at the pointy end of this race at the very end of it, because this was my first race back in a couple of months after illness. So I really wasn't in the sort of racing shape that I knew I was going to need to be in to do those two segments and then finish it off on the Epic KOM. So my plan here is to try and get points on the first sprint segment and then the Titans Grove KOM Reverse. I'm going to go all in on those two segments, and at least that way I'll be able to contribute some points to the team's overall standings, even if I'm not going to be able to win this one. Now, I must admit that's a look of concern on my face as I'm realising this is much harder than I anticipated. Well, it feels much harder than I anticipated. So I don't actually think that the pace is particularly brutal here, but I'm already starting to wonder if my name is Lieutenant Dan because I have no legs.
You ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan.
Yes, I know that.
And that is going to be a serious problem when we get to this sprint in just a minute. So I'm going to try and psych myself up, get to the front of this group so I don't have to do too much work on the little rise just before it. And whilst virtual Jake is psyching himself up, editor Jake wants to take a second to talk to you about this super cool podcast that I was a guest on this week, the In the Drops podcast with Zwifty Zwifter Rob Bain, On the Rivet Nathan Craik, and The Paceline Andrew Huddo Hudson. It's a really cool format where they've got the 3 regular hosts and a special guest every week, alongside some awesome weekly features like quizzes, roasts, and course recons. So I'll link that one in the description below. Make sure you check that episode out. Give them a like, comment, and subscribe. Tell them I sent you, and you won't regret it. So thanks, guys, for having me on this week. Really appreciated it. Had a great time. And speaking of roasts, I can only imagine what they would say about this as we come up to the sprint itself. As mentioned, I'm going to position myself to the front of the group on this little rise as I push my way up. I'm going to try all out here to score some points, and I'm thinking I probably need to get something here at the very least because I'm not sure I'm going to be in the pack afterwards to be able to get anything on the next segment. So really, really important that I get some points here and I go all out, everything I can, use my patented snowman sprint to try and score some points on the board. As we roll over the top here onto that -5%, I'm in a good position. Unfortunately for me, I have the anvil and not the feather. That is going to be a problem, not just now, but later on, but we'll have to get to that as right now, keep the power up and I elect to go here. The perfect place to launch that sprint. So I give it everything I've got. We're going to hammer it home, take some points and do some business for the team. At least that's what I think, and I'm in a really good position, but sadly I end up just doing an extremely glorified lead out for all the other sprinters in this race, as even with my absolute max effort there, I don't even manage to get into the top 10 on either FAL or FTS segments. So basically that was all energy expended at my absolute max limit for absolutely nothing. No points for me, no points for the team, and an emptying of every amount of glucose, carbs and sugar that I have left in my withered body. And amongst my mistakes there, we can count positioning timing. But the most devastating of all was going too far into the red. My golden rule for these sorts of races, these points races, is you never go all out and empty the tank completely. You always leave just a little bit in there on those segments for later on in the race. But I thought I was going to have to get some points here because I was going to get dropped later on, and I didn't even manage to do that despite going above my limits. So the power itself wasn't too bad, but I just made too many mistakes and I came away with nothing to show from it except pain and suffering. But sadly for me, that's not even going to be in the worst mistake that I make this race, and that mistake is just around the corner. Now, usually after that sprint on that bridge in these sorts of races, it calms down and you're able to recover. It's just typical that for me, the 1 week where I actually needed it to ease up a bit after that sprint, the pace didn't, and it continued to be high, so I didn't get any recovery, and I really am on the limit here, just trying to cling on to the back of this group, get as much draft as I can, and try to recover. But that feeds into the mistake, as I had possibly the worst idea I've ever had in a Zwift race, where I'm thinking, how can I give myself a bit more recovery here on this downhill to make sure that I'm okay for the climb coming up, because otherwise I'm going to suffer. And that's when I decide my genius idea is to press the anvil as we're going over the top of that climb. And you can see here that immediately I start to drift to the back of the group, even though I'm doing the same sort of power before. And I pretty much realized there that that was a terminal mistake. So I'm laying down the power. I'm doing well over 4.3, 4.4, 4.5 watts per kilo just to try and stay in contact with this group. And as you can see from my watts per kilo on the right hand side, it does not match the wattage in the top left hand corner. And that right there is the moment where I give up and realize I've just screwed myself completely out of being in the front pack. I'd never used the anvil before in a race scenario until then, and that probably was not the moment to try. But do not fear, because even though I'm just off the back of the main pack, I'm going to be able to get back on here. I'm looking at my power there going, what the hell is going on? And even then, we'd done just under 4.5 watts per kilo for 6 minutes was my average at that point. So not as high as it could be, but high enough to really cook me with that sprint. But never fear, because as I am dangling perilously close to the back of that group, hanging off the edge, the second peloton approaches from behind and sweeps up to form one bigger group. So it looks like I'm going to be able to get back on to this group and use their draft. But unfortunately, that's not to be. I'm just totally cooked, absolutely spent. I can't even get onto the back of that group. And for me, I will never see the front of that race ever again. And as if that wasn't frustrating enough, I could have not used the anvil, not expended that energy, recovered, sat back in that second group, and still been at the front of the race. So really poor tactics there, really poor power up knowledge. And that is the first time I've ever been dropped from the front 70 riders of a race in the first 7 minutes. And you know it's serious when the jersey comes off. So I stop pedaling, I take a good long hard look at my power numbers and my life choices, and I give serious consideration to throwing in the towel, quitting the race. Instead, I remember that there is the Titans Grove reverse coming up later on, and in a good news story, I do manage, even solo, to set the fastest time on the Titans Grove KOM reverse, so I do pick up some points for the team. I wasn't completely useless this race. It's just that it took me half an hour longer than everybody else to get pretty much the same points. However, in a sign of how good I thought my chances actually were of getting some points on Titans Grove, I ended the stream early out of pure shame and despair. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk in how not to win Zwift races and deploy power-ups. Thanks for all the support over the last few episodes. We're tantalizingly close to that 1,000 subscriber mark I've been going on and on about. So make sure you smash that like, comment, and especially subscribe button. And remember, most importantly, race fast, ride hard, and that you are appreciated.